Okay, so hello, my name is Ashley. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll be guiding you through a look at Django 101. A bit about myself, I did actually just graduate from a coding bootcamp, Coding Dojo, back at the end of May 2021, so very recently. I've learned full stack Python, Mern, and Java. I'll be the first to admit here that I don't know everything. I am still learning. And, you may come up with some great questions that I don't know the answer to, but, if during the class we get the opportunity to find out the answer, we will. Otherwise, we can stay in touch after this class and we will figure them out. Let's see. Now, one big disclaimer I want to put out here is since I'm still new and still learning a lot of things, I don't quite know if something is Django specific, if something's Python specific. So if I start talking very basic about something and you're like, yeah, we already know that because that's Python, just please humor me for a few minutes because, that is something I'm still figuring out. And okay, so I see somebody's joining right now. We're going to give them a minute to finish connecting to audio. Hi, Elaine. I see you just joined. We are recording tonight, so if you don't want your camera on, please go ahead and turn that off, and then we are going to get started.
Hi, Ashley.
Hello.
Got it.
Okay, so let's start with a very basic. Django is a framework for Python. It allows you to do a bunch of things. It is, front end, middle, back end. It uses MySQL as its native backend, but that doesn't mean that's the only one that can be used. I have something I want to show you. So it uses what is known as the MTV or MVC. What this is the model template view, but in the MVC, it's model view controller. What this allows you to do is, again, be full stack. You can build database tables, HTML pages that are going to go to your clients, incoming requests in logic. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we are going to do here is we are going to set up our virtual environment. Oh, sorry, one last thing before we begin. For this class, I am using Python version 3.9.2, Django version 3.2.5. I use VS Code as my code editor, and I am doing this on Windows, as you can see. So let's go ahead and create a virtual environment for this class. You don't always have to use a virtual environment for Django. It's the initial way I was taught, and it is the way that I am most comfortable at the moment. So that's why I'm teaching you this. So I'm going to cd into my environments folder. This is where I like to keep them. And in order to create my virtual environment, we're going to type venv python -m benv, and then the name of the virtual environment. In this case, I'm going to call it class. Oh, what did I type wrong?
I think you don't need the first V and V. You can just do the Python.
Give me 1 second. I have it right here. It's Python -m venv. And then, okay, so we see that it created my class virtual environment. Thank you, Marissa. So now we are going to activate this virtual environment. I don't need to move into that folder. I can just stay here in my top level folder. So again, I'm using git bash. So source class, and then it's scripts, and then finally activate. Now you can see here where it's saying the class in the parentheses above the active part of my terminal. So This is how I know I'm in the virtual environment. So now I'm going to go up to my desktop, and this is where I'm actually going to create my project. Now, all the steps that I'm about to use to create this project, I have it outlined in a Word document that I will be sharing along with the GitHub repo for this class once we are all done. So don't worry about that. So now what we want to do is we are in our virtual environment. So let's go ahead and install Django. I already have Python installed in the computer, so I'm not going to go over those steps. The way we're going to install Django is pip install Django equals, and in this case, 3.2.5. That is the latest version. That is why I'm using this one. Just like Python with Django, there are differences between some of the versions. Like older versions have certain features that the newer versions might have, and there's some depreciation in there. I always try to use the latest production version available. Now, going to work for a company or somewhere, you might end up having to use a legacy version based off of their stuff. So just be aware of that. Now you see right here this warning, you're using pip version 20.2.3, however, a higher version is available. For the purposes of this class, that's not something we are going to worry about. So now that we have that done, let's go ahead and actually start creating our project. So we're going to start by typing in our command, Django admin start project, and then whatever our project name is. So I'm going to call this time display. Oops, sorry, that one already exists. Now, the reason I'm calling this time display is this is based off of a school assignment we did. What this assignment is going to do that we're going to learn tonight is it's going to create an HTML page where it displays the current date and time, as well as we're going to throw in a series of random images that each time we refresh the page, we're going to get a new image, just something a little bit fun in there. Okay, so our next step, we're going to cd into our project. Now, at this point, we want to type run Python, Python manage py run server. So we're just firing up our server. We're going to check to see if we created this project correctly. The way we do this is we come here, we go to localhost 8000, and if you created your project correctly, this is what you're going to see. This installation worked successfully. Congratulations. And we get the rocket ship, links to release notes, documentations, all kinds of fun stuff. So now that that's done, we're going to Control-C and stop our server. Okay, now that we are in here, let's go ahead and create our app. You can have multiple apps in a Django project. For the purposes of this class, we're only going to have one. And because we're only going to have one, I'm going to name it main app. So what we are going to type is Django-admin start app. Just like before we did start project, this is start app, and then main underscore app. Just like Python, it does use snake case, not camel case or any of the others. And you need to be extremely careful that your project name and your app name are not named the same thing. You will cause a ton of complications. Now, I want to draw your attention to right here. It says you have 18 unapplied migrations. Your project may not work properly until you apply these migrations. At the moment, we're going to ignore that. We are going to get to that, but right now, we're not going to mess with it. Okay, now for a fun little trick, I'm sure most of you know this, but if you type code space period, it automatically opens up my window into my project. So if you give me a minute here, I'm just going to go ahead and size things up so everybody can see everything that I want you to see. Is everybody following along good so far? Does anybody have any questions at this point? Okay, I see nothing in chat, so let's continue. So we're going to go into our project level folder. In this case, it's the time display folder. We're going to do two things in here. After that, we're never going to touch this folder again. As you get into higher level stuff and more complex stuff, you're probably going to do more in this folder. But for the case of a very basic Django project, you're only going to make a couple quick edits in here, and then you're never going to use it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come to our settings.py. We're going to scroll down to our installed apps. We're going to make a new line. And with quotation marks, we're going to put in the name of our app, in this case, main app. Don't forget the comma after the end. I have autosave turned on mine, so you might notice a couple different things. No worries about that. And we're done with the settings py. Now we're going to come down here to the urls.py. We don't need to use the admin page for this, so I'm going to comment it out. You can delete it, your choice. What we're going to do for the next line, though, is we're going to include. We're going to come down here. Since we're not using our admin page, we're going to keep the quotation marks, but we are going to empty what's inside it, and then include main app.urls inside the quotation marks, ensuring that we have both parentheses there. When you're first setting up a project, these two lines here, it's very easy to make a mistake here. I've done it hundreds of times where it's, why isn't my project working? And I come to this page. I forgot one of the closing parentheses. I forgot the quotation marks. So definitely one to pay attention to. And that's it. We're 100% done dealing with the project level folder. So now we're going to come in here to the main app folder. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it urls.py, just like the one we had here. Okay. Now what we're going to do with this one is from Django.urls. This is just one of the base packages that come with Django. So we're saying that we are going to pull from this package and we are going to import the command path. What this is going to do is this is going to allow us to set up our routes where we say that, we want this page to go to this route, /admin or /books, whatever we happen to be doing. And then we're going to do from period import views. Now, I want to point out something very specific that you see going on here with my screen. You see here, I have these dots in all this white space. This is actually something that is enabled here in the settings. Let's see, where is it? White space, render white space. I have it set to all. Because Python and Django itself are so very dependent on indentations and spacing, you can completely break your app and just have it not function because you were one space over too far to the left or to the right. So that's why I have this turned on. I can see immediately where I have empty space and whether or not it should be there. I like to leave a few lines in between. This is just how I like to do it. I'm kind of OCD about certain things. You can do this however you want. So what we're going to do is URL, you see here, patterns. That needs to be lowercase. I'll be lowercase. Okay, equals, and then we are going to do an open square. Sometimes it will do that where it will autofill it for you. Just go ahead and delete it. If you have certain extensions or settings in VS Code where you can turn that off and you know where it is, that's wonderful. Whatever works for you that makes you the happiest. So now we're going to type path. This, you can see here, this is our routes, and we're going to do this using a string. So what we have is the open quotation marks. As we go through this course, you will see what goes there. But for right now, we're going to leave it blank, and then views.index. So views is just Django's way of saying, hey, I want to view this page. I want to view this page. Index is going to be the name of our HTML file. We're going to name it index.html. So now we're going to go into our views.py. See how it's named here, views? This is what it's referencing. So you see it is from Django shortcuts, import render. I'm going to take a quick shortcut and I'm going to type in redirect. The reason I'm typing in redirect is for the way that this project is, I like to have it so that my base page, the localhost 8000, automatically redirects to the page I want it to. Does it need to be that way? No, absolutely not. That's just one of the things that I like to do. So we see this native comment here, create your views here. I like to leave it there. Again, this is just kind of me being nitpicky to where I like that separation. It just helps keep things in order for me. So we are going to define index. And like I said, this index is because of what we named it here, views.index. If I name that views.banana, then we will be defining banana over here. So we are going to be requesting, and it already indents it for us, return render, open quotations. We are going to request index.html. So that is our basic views.py page. So here in our app folder, we're going to create a new folder. We're going to call it templates. It is extremely important that this be both lowercase and plural. This is just one of those rules in Django's that they're like, it's got to be this way. Now in here, this is where I'm going to create my index.html. So we see here our index.html. Let's see, when main app is created at the time. Yes, those are created automatically. However, the urls.py that I have here in the main app, I had to add that manually. Here at the project level, urls.py is part of the base package. But here in our app, urls.py, you have to add manually. Again, for those that might have joined late, yes, I have all this in a Word document with a step-by-step. You will get this as well as my GitHub repo where all this code is, and it's all going to be in a nice, neat little box for you. Along with that, my email address will be included. So if you have questions later or a week from now, feel free to hit me up. Okay, so here in VS Code, native shortcut, we hit the exclamation point. You are very welcome. So I'm going to rename this time display. And then we are going to come down here and hello and welcome to Django 101. Now, we have one more thing to set up. You see here that our server is still stopped. This is where we're going to address those migrations. What this is going to do is it's going to say, hey, you have these settings from before. Do you want to go ahead and add these to make sure everything's in sync? If this is your very first time with Django, you might not have that, and that's perfectly fine. But if you do see this, it's 2 simple lines of code to fix. Python. Let me break this down real quick. 1 second. So Python, we're working in Python. Manage.py, It's referencing this file right here, the manage.py. And then finally, make migrations. The make migrations is going to stage our migrations. It's not physically going to make them. Let's see, sorry, I had a hard time, got here late. Is Django supposed to be run on Linux? You can use Linux. I'm doing this all on Windows. You can do this on Mac. It's really whatever you're using. I've only done this on Windows, Bella, so it's entirely possible that running this on Mac or Linux might be done differently. I just don't happen to know those commands. If you do want to reach out to me after class, I can show you a few commands that would be useful for those running on Mac and Linux, because what I would type on Windows is not necessarily the same thing that you would type there. Yes, thank you, Marissa. I am using git bash. So these are essentially the Mac commands, and they're mostly the Linux commands. So going back to our migrations, no changes detected. That's fine, but we still need to physically make the migrations. So you see here, it's applying all my migrations. Now, once that is done, our project should be good to go. So how are we going to test this? Python manage.py run server. Okay, waiting for file changes with stat reloader. It's not directly giving me an error, so that is a great sign. So we're going to bring this back over, refresh. Hello and welcome to Django 101. So this is our project setup. This is the bare basics. Are there any questions right now? Okay, so I don't see any questions right now. I'm going to detour real quick and show you one of my absolute favorite things why I like Python and Django so much. So you see here, and you see my terminal window. You see that my server is running and I have my GET request. Well, let's break this real quick. We're just going to type path. You see here, it doesn't like it. Immediately in my terminal window, it's like, hey, timeout, I got a problem. And you see right here, it's telling me exactly where the problem is. And if we come here, take a second. Must be confusing it with a different language. But right here, you can see files, see users, etc. urls.py, line 9, path. It's an invalid syntax. So we go ahead and get rid of that real quick. She's right back up. I see it instantly. Now, when I say instantly, I mean that upon the save. Because I have autosave set up, it's pretty instant for me. If you do not have autosave turned on, you need to manually save however you do before you're going to see that. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my windows a little bit so we can go ahead and create our full project. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, there is no one specific way that we can do this. I'm going to mess with about 4 documents in here. You can do them in any order you choose. It's just whatever is a logical progression for you. For me, I want to get all my paths done. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start modifying things, okay? Why does that say that? So this is URL pattern up here. This should actually be path. Since Django is the specific language that I wish to work in. Oops, sorry, I messed the wrong one. Since Django is the specific language I am looking to work in, I have a bunch of extensions on here that are doing a bunch of things that for the basics, you're probably not going to want. You're going to see a lot of autofilling. You're going to see a lot of crazy autofilling. Just don't worry if it doesn't do it on yours, especially if you're coding along right now. It's perfectly fine. Like I said, I have a bunch of things installed. So what we are going to do Sorry, I'm just looking at something and I'm like, I honestly don't know why that line of code. That line of code there was from my migrations. I am working on taking a class on a RESTful API in Django, and that's one of the steps we are taking. So that's where that line of code came from. Again, we can just ignore it. So we were talking over in our views, we put a redirect in there. So let's go ahead and actually do this redirect. So our native path, which is just local 8000, the slash, which is the line 7 that you see, I'm going to change that to be root. And then I'm going to put a new path, and it's going to be index. So what that's going to be is localhost 8000 slash index, and then views dot index. Notice after the views dot index, I did not put a comma. That's just the way Django is, and you're going to see in a minute when we change over to the views, I'm pretty much not going to use a comma at all. Whereas, if you're coming from JavaScript, you get a lot of commas and semicolons and all. Django doesn't like those too much. They're not really needed. So for this project, that's our entire urls.py. Those are the only two routes we're going to need. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to maneuver my windows around a little bit. That way we can kind of see everything and the way it's working together. So next, let's go ahead and do our views. So we have our Django shortcuts, our import, render, redirect. I'm going to do two more imports. So the first is from time, time being a native Python Django package that if we're doing some type of clock in our project, that's what we have to import. And then it's import trf time. Again, one of the native packages. Thought I had it in front of me, what the strf time means, but in the end, you're going to see it's going to be a local time using the code that we put in. And once I put in the codes, I'll show you the actual code so that they make more sense. And then the final thing, we are going to import random, because with this project, we are going to be displaying random images each time we refresh. And then we're going to comma OS. What the OS is going to do for us is I'm pulling these images directly off of my hard drive. So the OS import allows us to use commands so that we can directly interface with a path on my hard drive. So let me drag some things over. In our main app, I am going to create another folder. We're going to call it static. This is where if you're doing any type of CSS or things that are just going to be static, this is where you're going to put them. Inside this, I am dragging over a folder called images. The reason I'm just dragging it over is it's all my JPG images. There's no need for me to sit here on camera and physically put these in the folder for you. That way, you see here that it's got it so it's static / images, and it's really weird. Don't worry about that. It's still showing exactly what you need it to. And if it bugs you, like it does me, click on static, and we will add, let's see, static.css. That is simply so it puts up a normal file structure. You can put anything you want there. In this particular case, because we're not using that file, I chose a CSS file because that is something that would typically be in this folder. So now let's come back here and deal with that OS import. So let me get myself some blank space. The way we're going to do this is we're going to give it the appropriate path. We're going to start with R, and then we're actually going to put in our function. And then my absolutely lovely assistant, Marissa, she's going to display in chat specifically what that R means while I put in this lovely path.
I am.
If she's willing, of course. So see users Ashley. This is just pointing to where I have my images. Slash. And that's it. That's our path. And the OS import, that's everything that it's doing right there. It's giving us the functionality to be able to import that path, and Django knows what's going on. So now we're going to come here and define our root request. This is the path that we put down here where we said we're just going to create a simple redirect. The R is for raw string literally. Thank you, Marissa. So in order to do a redirect in Django, we're going to return redirect where I want it to redirect to. So in this case, the route is /index. Now, going back to something I said earlier with that white space editor, you see how it's already extremely useful. Whereas if I just do that, there's no white space, and you see right there over to the right, it immediately says, hey, that's a problem. I'm broken. We just put one there. It's kind of happy. It's kind of not. I prefer tab. Some people prefer just, the two spaces. I use tab because I'm simple. So that's it for that route. That's all we need to do for that. So if we come back here and we go to localhost 8000, you see it's automatically driving us to index, even though I'm telling it to go to 8000. So now we have one more view to mess with, this index. So in order for us to be able to display this information on a web page, we're going to have to put this in context. What context is, it's a dictionary, plain and simple. So we're going to type context equals, and then we're going to do our curlies to establish our dictionary. So we're going to tell it what time is and how we want to use it. So we're going to tell it we want to use the strf time. You see right here, there's also strp time. This is just different modules for displaying it in different ways. I'm going to type in the codes here, and then I'm going to show you in the documentation what these codes mean. So we're going to come in here. We're going to do %A. The uppercase and lowercase here is extremely important, and I will show you that in just a moment. %B, %D. This is our month, date, and year. And then we're going to come over here to Y. A might be time zone. We'll look at that in a minute. And then H for our hour, M for minutes, and then Z. This is our time zone. Now, since we are in a dictionary and we are using curly brackets, we are going to head and put a comma here. Now, let me pull up and show you. Let's see. Show you the appropriate codes. Thought I had it pulled up, but apparently not. Let's see. So here's a quick little cheat sheet. This is strftime.org. So we see here uppercase and lowercase. They really do have different meanings, and it shows you what they each mean. For instance, lowercase a gives you the abbreviated date, but uppercase A gives you the full date. I'm going to go ahead and paste this in the chat so you have this link. And you see here, we can do a bunch of different things. We can do microseconds, seconds as a zero padded decimal number. I have no idea why you would want to do these things, but it allows you to do it. Now there are some cheat sheets down here. If you do lowercase c, lowercase x, uppercase X, it gives you the locale's appropriate date and time information. It's always been a bit tricky for me, and what I mean by that is natively, a lot of the time, it actually wants to give you, GMT time, which unless you happen to live there or you're working on a server that's what you're using, it's really not useful. I enjoy a lot of English football, so I know what time it is over there. My best friend lives in Germany. I can do that time translation in my head. But for most people here, everybody else in California, it's not really useful. So that's why I am doing these very specific codes. So now that we have our time codes, let's go ahead and mess with our images with that path we created. I'm going to call it background image. Time and background image, these are variables that we are establishing. You can call them whatever you want. You can call time pudding and background image, you can call it carpet. These are just variable names that you're giving it. So you saw over here where I placed the folder inside the static folder. So this is where we need to tell it where these are when we're using these variables on our HTML page. So what we're going to do is in quotations, static, because that's the folder that it's in, and then the subfolder images. And then we're going to tell it, and we want to do random.choice, because every time we refresh the page, we want a different picture to pop up based off of all the images in that folder. And then os.lister path. So the OS module, the list directory, and the name of the directory. In this case, we said path, and you see it here displayed as a literal. That's it. For this project, we are done with this page. After we're done, if some people want to see, I can show you an app I'm developing to where I have probably 100 lines of code in this one file. They can get pretty intense. So at this point, there's really only one thing left for us to do, and that's to set up our HTML page. So we're going to come over here to our index, and this is where everything is going to come together for us. So we have all that stuff on our back end, but we need to get it to our front end. The way we're going to do that is we're going to use something that's going to be called Jinja tags. And what Jinja tags are is, let me pull up where I have the description. I don't have everything memorized, and any coder that says they do have everything memorized, I don't trust them. So they are a type of string interpolation when using variables or a way to perform logic on the front end. Essentially, it's a way to take your back end and make it appear on the front end using these variables. So the very first thing we need to do is we need to load static. You can put this in a bunch of different places. I am putting it here just below the head for a number of different reasons. If we were using CSS, and think back to your HTML CSS days, we would have the line here in our head that's link, rel, style sheet, etc., etc. With Django, you need what we're about to type to be above that for it to work effectively. So the way we do this is curly brackets, the %, we want it to load, and then we need to tell it what we want. In this case, static. The way we close this command is another %. As you get further into Django and you start doing for loops, you're going to do them, let's see, where is it? For var I in banana, you're going to, it likes to do that when you hit enter, just be careful. And then this is where you're going to put in your for loop using your JavaScript. The way you're going to end it is end for. and for loop. Pretty simple. The curly bracket and the percent sign is what tells it I'm a Jinja tag. Look at me like a Jinja tag. Jinja is spelled Jinja. If you want to look it up, it is in the Python documentation under templates. I feel like it could be a bit more well written, but the information is there. So now we're going to get rid of this in our body and just add in a couple quick things. I'm going to use an H2. The date and time is R, to be grammatically correct. And this is where our Jinja tags and our variables come in. So I want to do a double curly, give it my variable, and then close it out with a double curly. So it's going to save that real quick. You see my server's up. The current date and time are. See right there, nice and simple. Why isn't it actually showing the time? It should be showing my time already. Let's troubleshoot this.
Missed something in your views.py, Ashley.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm looking.
The context variable, you need to pass it in.
Oh, are you saying these should be doubles?
No, you should pass the variable in as an argument to the render function.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Like Marissa was just correcting me, when you're using context, you need to ensure that you put it down here. Otherwise, it's not going to know that the context is there and it needs to be used. So now if we come back here, the current date and time are Monday, July 19th, 2021 at 18:45 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. This is what those A, B, and D are all about. So with mine, I believe it's the H code. Let's take a look at that. Let's see. Where was our codes? H. Hour as a 24-hour clock. I did 14 years in the Marines. Extensive military background. So I like a 24-hour clock. Doesn't need to be that way, but it just makes sense in my head. It's just a personal preference. So now we're going to put this back down here so we can see everything at once as we go. Let me just adjust that. And now for our final piece, put in some breaks because I found it looks better when we put in some breaks on here. So let's deal with our images. In this case, I chose Disney princesses because I want it to be cute. So today's Disney princess of the day is, so now just like HTML, image, source, but here's where it's different. We go back into our Jinja tags using our variable background image. Close it out. Don't forget that closing. Make it save. Ooh. So we can see here that it's like, hey, I want to be an image, but let's find out where it went wrong. My guess is it's got the path wrong here in our views. In root requests and index, what reference is being passed as requests? Give me just a minute to see what I did wrong here, and I will get to that question for you, Uma, okay? So let's see, we are in our views.py. Let's take a look. One thing I found is when teaching a class or you're going to explain to somebody, you practice it beforehand and you have a working version of it over here off to the side. That way you don't spend too much time troubleshooting and referencing things. So main app static images. Tell you what, we're going to try something a little different. No. Path RC users. Let's see. It's something small. I always miss something small. But that's the fun of programming now, isn't it? Static images. Yep. BG, IMG. Yep, that's correct. Ooh, did I forget that? Okay. Let's do this because sometimes it likes to be extremely finicky. No, interesting, very interesting. No, this is good. You get to see some good troubleshooting. Let's see, image source, BMG. Yep, that's correct. I'm gonna move that down just because I'm being nitpicky. Def index, request, context, time, mystery of time. Yep. BG image, static images, random choice, OS lister path. Import random OS. I always find that images are some of the most particular things in Django that don't like to work properly.
What's the value that it's trying to put into the page, Ashley? Can you show the inspect view of the HTML?
Yes. Okay, so we're going to come over here to the inspect view. I am using Chrome for this. I use Chrome and Firefox, but when I'm using my local host, I specifically like using Chrome. So we see here image stores. See right there, images, and it is missing a slash. So let's come over here, and there's our problem. Thank you, Marissa. Marissa was on the instruction staff when I was at school. That's how I met her. She definitely helped me graduate. Oops. So let's bring this back over here. Let's refresh this. And there we go. Today's Disney Princess of the Day. In this case, it's Goth Ariel. We're going to refresh it. We have Mulan. And we're going to give this a moment because I want to show you the time actually changing. While we wait for that, that's it. That's our entire project start to finish. What we've displayed here is the basics for setting up a Django project. Shown some basic views, some routes, basic functions, and yeah, this is bare bones. This is a 101 course. If there are more things you want to see or more things you would wish to learn, please just let me know. Okay, now that we see it's changed, 1852. So we see it's working. Right here, my favorite Disney princess, best one ever. So essentially that's it. Are there any questions right now while I pull up something else to show you? Okay, so let me show you my GitHub repo, and I'm going to give everybody this link. This video is being pushed to YouTube at some point, and this GitHub repo link will be part of the title information on YouTube. So you see here, Django demo, all this stuff. The document where I have the step-by-step, which let me show you that real quick, because I want you to see how cool this is, not to toot my own horn, but I am. So you see here, I've included actual images where certain things need to be. Now, for instance, installed apps, our main app name doesn't have to be at the top. Some of the courses I've been taking, they've actually decided to put them at the bottom. There is no real rhyme or reason to this that I have learned yet. There may be, but I haven't learned it. As far as our urls.py, here's a snapshot. Oh, absolutely. I'm definitely posting that GitHub link in the chat as soon as we're done with it. Now, going back to a question that, where is it? Uma asked about the urls.py. So you see here, we create our routes, the urls.py, and here's the information. You see here at step 11, we go to our app folder. We create a new urls.py. Why Django doesn't natively do that, I don't know. It's something I would like to figure out someday, but right now it is what it is. Maybe we'll see it in an upcoming release.
Yeah, not all apps want to do that, but if you want to do code reusability with one app being used in different projects, it's easier to include the URLs that are part of that app. So you could skip creating it if you want to.
Yeah. Marissa is the source for everything. She is amazing. So yes, definitely, I always listen to her. Now we see here actual images of what this should be like. Now there is definitely a bunch of different things that you could do here, like 12 when we're in our views.py. Where is we're at? You could do import render HTTP response. You could do a JSON response. It all depends on your needs and what you're doing. This isn't the end all be all. I am taking a course right now where half of what I just showed you, we actually didn't do as a setup. It kind of blew my mind, like, what? You don't have to do that? It's all based off of the, what's the words? The specs you get from the team that tell you how to design things. I don't quite know the words, but I hope you understand what it is I'm trying to say. What I also have in here is I have some basic stuff in here. You see my email. Here's another link to the Word document. Some general references. I have the Python document link. I have the Django document link. What is SRFT time? What is context, import OS, what the Jinja tags are. And I'm going to put a couple more in there, like those cheat sheets links for the time codes. Now, down here at the bottom, I went through my extensions and I picked out a few that I think for basic Python and Django, these would be good. Bracket pair colorizer, Genero Django snippets. This is what does a lot of the autocompletes. The white space enables prettier Pylance Python. With Python, let me show you something very particular that I've noticed. Let's come over here to my extensions. So you see here, Python. It says that Pylance is a part of this. It doesn't work right. If you install Pylance separately, you get a ton more features that, in theory, you should get with Python. So just some thoughts. And so let me put this in here. Yes, the spec is tailored based off of customer group requirements. It's just like any one language, there is no one size fits all. Like, for instance, let me pull up a new window. I'll show you a couple things. The main course I'm taking right now online is a RESTful API. So let's go to Django REST. And so you see here, I already have two apps in here, the FBV app, as well as the main app in the first project. There's all kinds of interesting things. And talking about the extensions and the things that'll pop up, elif, if you don't know, is else if for, if you're saying if this, else this. In Python Django, it's an elif statement. Oh, I must have disabled it. Let me enable it for you real quick. Let's see. At this point, I'm just kind of showing you cool tricks, some things that I can think of that I think you might want to see. If anybody has any questions that they are curious about, or there's something they want me to go back over, please let me know. Because this actually went a lot shorter than what any of us were expecting. So you see right there, it autofilled a bunch of things: self, arguments, KW arguments, a ton of things that in more advanced stuff you would end up using. For what we didn't need it all. If we were to be using models, we would see a lot of this self stuff, models.model type thing. But for this, that's not what we ended up doing. So are there any last questions? Is there anything you want me to go over again? Anything else you want to look into? Anything I forgot to mention? Any questions I didn't answer? Please, this is all your time at this point. And while you do that, I'm going to correct this slightly. Why is Django better than other frameworks? That's a really interesting question. I would have to refer back to a statement at the beginning of the class that I only graduated bootcamp a few months ago. We were taught two frameworks, Flask and Django. This is the one we concentrated the most on, so this is the one that I know the most, and therefore it's the one I like best. Looking at statistics, it is probably the most common Python framework in use right now. So that's another reason why I'm focusing on it, because if you're going to get a job in Python, there's pretty good odds you're going to be dealing with Django. It's also one of those things where it's not necessarily better or good for certain things, but you just might prefer it. Let me see if I can find Flask versus Django, why I specifically mentioned these two, because there was something very interesting that I saw. Django is for perfectionists on a deadline. Nice, very nice. Or so they brand themselves.
They also brand themselves, just to chime in quickly. Hi, Ashley, it's Bethany.
Hey, Bethany.
Django is like Python, batteries included. And by batteries, they mean batteries. So it comes with its own ORM. It ships with a database that you can use out of the box. It has its own templating language. It has all of the security rules you could ever want, plus more that you don't want to deal with. It was made by two people. It was started by two people who worked for the Kansas City Star back in the day before all the newspapers were on the web. And these two poor web devs, were having to repeatedly build out the Kansas City Star's website. And they were like, why are we doing this over and over again? We ought to build a framework. And so the whole thing was around getting something like the New York Times' website or the Kansas City Star's website up and going as fast as possible. So the great thing about Django is, if you're thinking along the same lines as the framework, as you've seen tonight, you can get a really basic thing up in an hour. Like, it's blindingly fast. The downside is, if you want to do something a little bit creative, like doing a RESTful API, which DRF does, or you don't want to use the templating language, you want to replace the front end with React, then you have to start fighting it a little bit. So if you crank over all the way to the other side, Flask is a super, super, super lightweight framework. And you can plug anything you want into Flask. So that's the upside. The downside is you have to do the thinking about what ORM you want to use. You have to do the thinking about what kind of security you want to use. You have to do the thinking about how you want to wire it up, because Flask basically gives you routing. And then the rest you have to make decisions on. So they're kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum. They're both really excellent, but they're used very, very differently. Django's used for something that you want to get up in production ready without a whole lot of effort along a specific line. Flask is used for, data scientists use it all the time for internal dashboards, for putting tools together, for throwing up something quick, because it's very lightweight.
Thank you so much for that, Bethany. She's actually one of the organizers of these groups. She helped me set this up. We kind of came up with the idea together, and kind of just building on what she just said, I did put this link in chat, Flask versus Django. It's the way it was explained to me is using Flask as the example. Flask is a couple of tools. Django is the whole toolbox. Flask is like a hammer and a screwdriver, where Django is that full 140-piece set. Built-in template engines. It does come with an admin panel, which is going back towards the beginning, that admin line of code that we commented out. It's useful. For this particular project, it wasn't useful, but it is very useful. Different levels of flexibilities. Django, there is a high learning curve. I 100% agree with that statement. I personally don't feel it's too bad, but yeah. So does that answer your question?
Compared to other, yeah, I was just going to chime in too. Compared to other frameworks at the same level, Django is no more difficult. So if you were, say, learning Ruby and you ended up using Rails, it's almost a one-for-one. I'm working on a project right now that uses Rails. Yes, it's Ruby's the language instead of Python, but Rails and Django basically are almost identical as frameworks. And then if you go over to Java, you've got Spring, and it uses a lot of the same patterns. So it just depends on whether or not you want to use a full stack framework. I think that a lot of places are moving away from that, but for places that do, if you learn Rails, Django's not so bad. If you learn Django, Rails is not so bad, and so on. So.
Okay, so are there any other questions at this point? Oh, and if you want to be really cool like me with these icons where it's Python and all, that is actually an extension called, where is it? File icons. You can do it for pretty much any language. I just like to be fancy. I'm the type of person that I will spend 2 hours tinkering with one small thing when I'm actually supposed to be coding. Yeah, it's not quite the best. Okay, well, if nobody else has any questions right now, again, my name is Ashley. Thank you so much for coming to this class. I've put the GitHub link in chat. You can go there. Again, it's the entire repo, the builds document that I mentioned, and also my email address. If you want to say or ask me something in private, you can reach out to me there. If you have any thoughts on how this class went and what we covered, I'd love to hear it. Positive, negative, middle of the road. It's actually my first time teaching a class, so I would love to hear what everybody thinks. But other than that, thank you so much for coming to this special meeting of the PyLadies meetup. Bethany being one of our organizers. She can probably give more information about our next meeting, which I believe is the first Monday in August. And
it is, it's August 2nd, but that one is a far more casual kind of, we just get out and geek out on Python sort of thing. But we do have more formal things like this that we have in the works, and certainly chime in, tell Ashley, tell us if you want to see more of these. We definitely would love to do more in a series where we build something more complicated or go over other frameworks. So do let Ashley know and let us know.
Yeah, I actually do want to teach more classes. I want to do more complicated stuff. So if you have an idea, you want to see it, that we can build together in these classes in a series of classes, please let me know. I'm always searching for new ideas, new things to do. So yeah, it's a good group, good meetup. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead. If there's no more questions, I'm going to stop the recording. The